Hello.
Apologies, Eugene.
Yes.
Could we just test your audio again? I just may need to refresh as well. 1 second.
Okay. Should I say something? Should I say something? Okay. We're gonna have to close the door.
If you could say a few words, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay. I'm in the office right now, and we're starting with registration, so I'm closing the door. Otherwise, students are going to want to come in and ask questions, which just happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Many thanks. Double checking with interpreters. I think we're good. And I suppose it's worth mentioning, if you had another headset available, we could try that as well. But if not, don't worry, we're okay.
This is the only one I have.
Sure, understood. Thank you.
But I can ask once somebody comes, if there's anybody here at the office who has a headset. But I assume this will be the only one.
Nothing. Understood.
Okay. Sorry, Ben.
No, that's fine. It's just so we can get a clear sound for interpreters. That's all.
Okay.
But I think we're good.
I'll make sure to speak slowly. I used to be an interpreter and translator myself. I used to be a court certified interpreter.
Yes.
Translator.
I'm familiar with this. Yeah.
in earlier days back in Austria, like I did the Gerichtsdolmetsch for German and English. No one wants German English in Lebanon.
Right, understood. Yeah. So yes, so you understand the need for clear sound.
Exactly. I will try to speak slowly and clearly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just one question, Tamara. Will someone be introducing me, or will I just start off the whole thing? I assume someone from the OHCHR is going to kick the thing off.
Yes, of course. It's gonna either be me or Lian. Just
okay. So I'll wait for your introduction, and then after you're done, you will hand it over to me, and I'll take it from there. Then at the end, will you come back, or should I then close it down at 12, or will I hand it back to you at 12?
No, you can close it. It's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I will leave the floor now. I wish you a good meeting, but of course, please feel free to stay in touch via messaging if we can support further.
Just one question, Ben.
Sure.
How do I have the messaging box smaller? Because now it's taking up half my screen. When I click on messages takes half my screen.
If you do Control plus or Control minus, you can zoom the browser in and out slightly, which may resize the screen slightly for you.
Okay.
That would be the best way.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, that's a pleasure.
All right. All right, welcome everyone. I hope you're having a good day today. We're gonna kick off the conference on monitoring the right to food in Lebanon. I would like to thank you all for coming and participating in this conference. And for today, our facilitator will be Dr. Eugene. He's a senior professor in the Faculty of Law and Political Science at Notre Dame University in Lebanon. He has extensive expertise in many areas, and he's also been involved in the food sector. I would like to now give him the floor so that he can introduce himself better and kick off this session. And thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm not seeing myself on the screen. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. Today, it's an
Okay, so Dr. Eugene just give us 2 minutes. Can I ask all participants to request to speak so you can all be visible on the floor?
Tamara, should I begin now?
Yes, Dr. Eugene, you can go ahead.
Okay. I would like to welcome all our panelists and our audience who's joining us both on this website, but also on YouTube and on Facebook. There will be 2 rounds of chat-based questions after each section. But before we get started, I would like to just introduce all of the panelists, and we do have one change. Minister or Caretaker Minister of Agriculture Abbas Mortada has not been able to come because of urgent family issues, and he will be represented by Senior Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and former Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, Wafa Al-Dia, who will be speaking first in this round. Then we have Caretaker Minister, we have to say that again, of Economy, Trade, and Trade for Lebanon, Raoul. The third participant on the panel is Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michelle Fakhri, who's joining us from Eugene, Oregon. So the 2 of us have agreed to call myself Gene so that there's no confusion. Then the next one is Maurice Saade, Country Representative, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. And finally, 2 speakers from the World Food Program, Marco Principe, Head of Research, Assessment and Monitoring, RAM, at the World Food Program, and Ms. Michelle Isemenga, that might be German, Head of Program for the World Food Program. I would like to kick this off in the first hour. We'll be having 2 hours. The first hour is dedicated to a general discussion amongst the panelists on topics which have been shared with the panelists and which all of them will respond to. Then we will have a 20-minute discussion amongst the panel, and then we'll have 20 minutes for discussion with the audience. So please post your questions under messages, which is the chat function, and we will then get selected. Of course, we can't deal with them all because we're up to almost 100 participants in the first round. The second round will be then focused, will be targeted questions with the expertise of each of our panelists. These are also kickoff questions, and then we'll have a discussion amongst the panel for 20 minutes, and finally, another 20 minutes of Q&A. So I would like, in the order that I mentioned, which is Wafa Al-Dia, then Raul Naime, then Michael Fakri, then Maurice Sade, Principe, and Michel Isamenga, to please respond to the following question in 2 minutes, please. And I've been told by the OHCHR, our colleagues Lynn Aid and Tamara Bouchaheen, to be very strict with the 2-minute response time, because after the first 15 minutes, we will have another chance for 20 minutes of discussion amongst the panelists. So the first 2 questions, very briefly, each one of you, in the order I mentioned, 2 questions, 2 minutes. First question, is the current crisis in the agricultural and food sector the result of poor governance, especially poor policy monitoring? As we know, the main focus of today's conference is on monitoring. And the second focus is, this conference is being organized in the context of the International Youth Day. What role can youth in Lebanon play in facing the current food crisis? In preparation for this panel, we were discussing what is it like to be 18 or 25 and growing up in Lebanon under these conditions. We all remember when we were that age. Personally, I'm happy that I didn't have to go through this at that time. So please, those 2 questions again in the order mentioned. So first of all, for 2 minutes, Wafa Al-Dia.
I'm sorry, Dr. Eugene, we're just waiting for His Excellency Raul Naame to join. He's having just some troubles, so that he can join us in the discussion. Just 1 minute.
Okay, we'll wait. While we're waiting for him to join, Michelle, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's Eisminger. Yes, thank you.
Eisminger. Okay, Eisminger. Okay. And you're German?
Yes. No, I'm from New York City. Thank you.
Oh, so you've Americanized it. Okay, Eisminger. Okay. Good. Okay, now jetzt sind wir komplett. Now we're all here. Okay. His Excellency, Caretaker Minister of Economy Trade of Lebanon, Raul Naime is now here as well. Your Excellency, just to recap what we went through, we will be placing 2-minute questions for each panelist. You will be the second to respond. There are 2 questions, then we'll have 20 minutes on the panel, and then 20 minutes of Q&A. That's in the first hour. In the second hour, it'll be the same thing, but in the second hour, each person will get a directed question to his or her expertise. Again, 20 minutes discussion on the panel, and finally, a Q&A with the audience. So again, I'll just repeat the 2 questions for His Excellency. In 2 minutes, is the current crisis in the agricultural and food sector a result of poor governance, especially poor policy monitoring, knowing that the main conference topic today is the issue of governance and monitoring? And second of all, this conference is being organized in the context of International Youth Day. What role can youth play in facing the current food crisis here in Lebanon? Okay, so to start with, for the minister, hello, advisor to the minister, Wafa Al-Dia. Please.
Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I apologize on behalf of His Excellency Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Abbas Murtada, due to an urgent family matter. So I'll be speaking on the behalf of the Minister of Agriculture. Addressing your question, Mr. Chair, I will speak in Arabic, actually, maybe is better, and I will speak slowly, so for the interpretation.
I believe that the food security crisis in Lebanon is deeply rooted in the history of how agriculture and food were addressed in the past years. We cannot say that it is a problem of governance or a crisis of governance, but it is a crisis in directing and targeting the different agriculture policies. That's because the different governments provided support and subsidies of this sector at many levels, but perhaps they weren't able to direct them soundly when the crisis first came to appearance. Because we were depending on import, 80% of our food was imported. So this was the first problem, that we had to depend on importation of food. And also, the different agricultural programs were not targeting the farmers and food producers so that they can lower production costs. So we had many programs, but perhaps they did not achieve their objectives. And this also can be due to the lack of budgets allocated to these programs. On another level, the issue of food was not tackled comprehensively, as is the case at the world level, which the current summit, which will be held in September, the Food Systems Summit, is asking for. Now, had we had in Lebanon this integrated, comprehensive work between all those involved in food and agriculture, whether it is the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Economy, knowing that we do cooperate with them, and with us we have His Excellency Minister Raoul Nami, who will talk about our cooperation. But at the same time, there is the Ministry of Energy and Water, the Ministry of Health, that should all be involved and concerned with the issue of food and agriculture. So now I think that during this time of crisis, we need to give the dossier of food and agriculture top priority. This is in answer to the first question. Shall I answer the second question as well, Mr. Chair? Concerning young people in Lebanon, with the modern cutting-edge technologies and their literacy of it, I think that if we use IT in agriculture, then this is an opportunity to involve young people more. And I mean that whenever we talk about supporting agricultural sector with technological means, the continuation of support in order to conduct a quantum leap in agriculture, it is essential to have the youth on board.
Now to move to His Excellency Raoul Name. Again, please, in 2 minutes, to sum up your response to the questions, after which we'll have a discussion on the panel.
The crisis in Lebanon, would it be in agriculture, industry, or whatever, has been in the making for 30 years because of completely wrong economic approach. Politics prevailed over economy and finance, prevailed against good economic approach, good economic plan. In fact, until now, no real economic plan has ever been made that encompasses all the sectors, and that says that we have to go from a rentier-type economy to a productive economy. Or say, for example, yes, knowledge economy is the future, or agriculture is very important for food security. So what do we have to do for agriculture, for food security? And we have to go to high value add. Do we have to go to high value added and export and then buy low value added products from agriculture? What about quality? We are unable, the ambassador, French ambassador was telling me, you're not using your quota because you don't have enough quality, you don't have enough production. Agricultural production to export to Europe. So it is a political issue, first. political in essence, and the solution is political. And what we are seeing today, which is a break in the food chain supply because of oil, diesel oil, and fuel problems, is as well a political issue, because we politicians are not willing to recognize that we have a problem and take the necessary decision that require hard decisions that may not be very popular. So, but at the same time, I think we have to educate a lot more our farmers for them to go to higher value added and higher quality. So this is my opinion about your first question. As far as the second question, well, the solution is political. I think when they go to the voting for politicians, they have to choose the right politicians, the ones that will be able to get the country out of this problem. Not the same politicians that we had, because this is the only solution. We have to change the way we are doing things in Lebanon. Now, if the same politicians can do it, be it, but it has to change. We cannot continue like before. And here the youth has a very important role. They have to push for it. The country is not our country anymore. You know, we're getting old and so on. It is their country. They have to push for it. They have to push for solutions. They have to go and vote massively to change things. So this is what I hope for.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I move on to from the government representatives to the representatives of both the UN and academia. And Michel Fakhri, who's both an expert and a watchdog in a certain way, please answer those two questions in 2 minutes.
شكرا دكتور يوجين وشكرا للجميع. ما تواخذوني بس رح كفي.
Thank you, Dr. G. Thank you, everyone. Allow me, please, to continue in English.
Is it the root cause of all food security problems in all countries? And I recently read the new National Agricultural Strategy for Lebanon. It was well researched and well written. It included a theory of change that requires two preconditions. One, a functional Lebanese government, and two, an international development community that can coordinate its work and serve people in Lebanon. The problem is that those preconditions have been impossible for decades due to structural problems. People need to rely on the government to implement change, but people also need to change the fundamental structure and operation of the government. How can people expect change from leaders that have benefited from the very system that is creating the problem? The Beirut port explosion not only destroyed people's lives, it destroyed any hope for political change. Moreover, the international community has been part of the problem for a long time. Recent IMF and World Bank proposals do not address people's social needs or their human rights. Almost half of recent humanitarian aid was taken by the banks and reach people most in need. I think human rights can provide the preconditions necessary for any plan to work. So I would reframe the question in these terms. How can the right to food monitoring push against cynicism and despair and enable people in Lebanon to mobilize? Let me focus on two issues with the right to food monitoring in general, and then talk about Lebanon and the role of youth in Lebanon and what they can do. Monitoring usually focuses on things like legislation, policies, budgets, violations, and judicial mechanisms. But what I think youth who are interested in doing human rights can do is track what is actually working in their local communities. How are people surviving today? And monitoring can be a positive thing as well. And I would ask these questions. What are people doing to connect local producers to consumers? What old and new cooperatives are connecting producers to consumers or making sure imported food reaches people at affordable prices? Which municipalities are making sure people don't go hungry, and how are they doing that? And what are syndicates, professional associations, hospitals, and schools doing that is helping people fulfill their right to food? This type of monitoring can generate the narratives and knowledge necessary to create political change. Shukran. Back to you, Eugene.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you also for keeping your time limit. I would like now to move on to Maurice Sadeh, Country Representative, the Food and Agricultural Organization in Lebanon. And please, again, for 2 minutes, the role of monitoring and the role of youth.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to be brief because many of the points were raised by Minister Nami and by Madame Wafa. I fully agree that the issue is not necessarily a question of governance, but more of neglect for the agricultural sector and for the productive sectors in general, in favor of the service sectors, as Minister Nami mentioned, over the past 30 years. This neglect is clearly illustrated by the very limited budget that the Ministry of Agriculture has had over the last 30 years. Usually it's less than, I'm not sure the correct figures, but definitely less than 1% of the government budget, more closely to 0.6%. And this is barely enough to cover the operation cost of the ministry, and very few resources are left for any investment in agricultural infrastructure or extension, research, and so on, whatever is needed to promote the agricultural sector. But in general, I fully agree with Mr. Nami that the crisis is more of a macroeconomic crisis. Is a result of macroeconomic crisis, primarily because of the over-evaluation of the Lebanese pound over the past decade at least. This over-evaluation has resulted in the cost of production for Lebanese products are high. Lebanese products are too expensive compared to competitors from the region. And this is particularly that many of those competitors have devalued their currencies in the past decade. I refer, Syria is the biggest example, but also Turkey, Egypt, and so on. And therefore, gradually, Lebanese products have lost their competitiveness. But also, there have been other factors that have undermined the development of the agriculture sector before the crisis. The illegal smuggling, especially from Syria, and that undermined the Lebanese products. The disruption of trade routes to the Gulf via Syria, even after the borders was reopened back in 2018, still there are lots of restrictions for the exports of Lebanese products to the Gulf countries, which is the main market for Lebanon. It was mentioned by Mr. Nami, the poor enforcement of quality and safety regulations, for example, pesticide residues. So we're not able to export to the European market, which is the very high value, high profitability market, and we're missing on that opportunity. The last point I want to mention is the lack of control over the wholesale traders and the wholesale markets. And it falls under the mandate of several ministries, including Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Economy and Trade, and the municipalities and so on, which has resulted in more of a monopolistic behavior in those markets, and therefore the farmers are not receiving the fair value for their products that they're selling. Moving on very quickly to the role of youth, Madame Wafa mentioned very clearly the importance of the contribution of youth in the area of high technology, particularly digital agriculture. Youth have a contribution to make because they bring in knowledge, innovation. As we all know, the average age currently of the Lebanese farmers is around 55 years old. Most of them are very traditional, and we need this infusion of entrepreneurship, of new knowledge and technology, and this is a contribution that the youth can bring in. But also, and just to back up what Dr. Fakhri has mentioned, the role of the youth is to hold the policymakers accountable, and more they need to monitor what the policymakers are doing, and they need to hold them accountable for whatever they're doing. So thank you very much, and I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And I'm moving on now to Marco Principe, the Head of Research, Assessment and Monitoring for the World Food Programme. Thank you.
Thank you. We've seen at WFP that the current food crisis has been fueled by increasing unemployment and poverty, the inflation rates, and as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. In March, about 22% of the Lebanese population and more than 50% of the Syrian refugees were food insecure. This is because Lebanon is an import-dependent country and agriculture has not been seen as a high priority sector for the government. In fact, it only produces 5% of GDP and provides only 20% of the food needs of the country. The agricultural value chain is fragmented. Smallholder farmers are not well connected to local markets and lack legal and financial support. There are also logistical barriers and transportation costs that are high, as well as rising cost of land, the absence of credit facility, and the currency devaluation. Also, food subsidy has led to an efficient allocation of resources that are scarce and they are not targeting the poorest. A recent national agriculture strategy was adopted last year, and it will be important to closely monitor the results until the period until 2025. As well, most of the challenges are also due to the lack of an official employment strategy to address the rising level of poverty and inequality, which also hamper access to food for those that are not dependent on the agricultural sector. We've seen that more than half of the wage earners had the same monetary income of the past year, while the cost for goods has increased over 5 times since October 2019. At the same time, unemployment has gone down, and we've seen that in March, less than 40% of the labor force was employed, with the unemployment rate reaching above 30% level. So what are youth can do what is the role of youth in this crisis? We will need to change the perception of youth towards the agricultural sector, and we need to develop policy that strengthen youth engagement in agriculture. This will need to support youth to access opportunities, including access to land, information and knowledge, and as well providing opportunities in the context of innovation in the agricultural sector and develop the areas, for example, wine production, where Lebanon it's a strong producer and a strong player in the international market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for keeping in the time. Our final speaker is Michelle Izaminger. I got it right.
Yes, thank you.
I got it right. And please, again, the 2 questions, and then after your input, we will open it up for discussion amongst the panelists. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us. On the question of governance and policy, I think a lot has been said already on that with regard to the fact that there are existing policies on the books. They may need to be better implemented, better monitored, but the policy framework is there. And I agree with Mr. Fakhri with regard to the recent agricultural strategic framework for Lebanon, which really was holistically created and needs the funding and the budgetary support to ensure that it can be rolled out in all the different areas. I think the connection for this discussion on the right to food and the policies that exist would have to do more with ensuring there's momentum and commitment from an interministerial approach to embrace the various guidelines in the voluntary guidelines of the right to food. So many of the larger issues are outlined there, and whether or not there would be at the Prime Minister's office or the interministerial, some type of directorate board to go through systematically those various chapters, whether it's in nutrition, or whether it's fulfilling agricultural policy or protective safety nets. All of these things have something to do with ensuring citizens have the right access, safety measures for food, are able to have livelihoods in the processing, whether it's using IT technology as suggested by the Honorable Minister earlier, or what have you. So it has to be a momentum based on commitment to ensuring that the highest level of the guidelines for the right to food are enacted. And I can just give an example with regard to social protection. WFP is highly involved with the government in rolling out protective safety nets, whether it's the MPTP or the new coming ESSN. These ensure that the poorest, the most vulnerable, do have access to food and have the monetary support that they can have diversity in their diet and choice on the open market. Supporting local markets is also one of the most significant things. So recently, WFP, we put a cash-based transfer into the MPTP so that local produce can be purchased and it can have people in the programs can have a more diversified diet. These type of local initiatives will support a wider expanse for the smallholder farmers. With regard to youth, I think there are significant youth networks active in Lebanon, and maybe more investment and support needs to be given to them so they can feel more empowered, more engaged to advance community building, ensuring that youth have a voice for positive advocacy to ensure that food policies, food safety, consumer groups all have youth engaged in them. So whether it's food, like biofood is very a growing field in Lebanon, supporting regional trade and meeting the standards so that you can do export, youth have to be at the table. And I really applaud that this opportunity for us to speak is broadcast and engaging with youth, and hopefully we'll hear some suggestions from them in the upcoming discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we're almost right on time. I just want to repeat for those of you who've joined the conversation late, the speakers are again, Wafa Al-Dia, advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and former Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, speaking for Abbas Murtada, who cannot make it today. His Excellency, Minister Raoul Neme, Caretaker Minister of Economy and Trade in Lebanon. The Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Professor Michael Fakhri. Then the Country Representative, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Mr. Maurice Saade. Mr. Marco Principe, Head of Research, Assessment and Monitoring, RAM at the World Food. Finally, our last speaker was Ms. Michelle Izaminger, Head of Program, the World Food Program, again, WFP. I saw a lot of overlap with the presentations, and now we're going to open it up for a discussion between the panelists, and so please ask to speak when you want to say something. One of them that I saw, and this was actually introduced by Wafa Al-Dia, was the issue of IT and the way that youth can play a big role, because this is part of their education. And unlike us, even the youngest amongst us, we're still relatively new to social media and IT. It's not in our DNA the way it is with our children. The second issue was that youth are actually making decisions. His Excellency Minister Naime pointed that out. Youth actually are voting. As of 21 in Lebanon, they can vote, and they also do carry a responsibility for who gets into office. Michael Fikri was talking about youth are actually on the ground. And this is, we all say that all act globally, think globally, act locally, or all politics is local. Here I see a lot of potential because youth are active in their communities, in schools, and in their neighborhoods. And then, of course, the Maurice Saade pointed out the role of the market and the lack of control for wholesale and retail. This is a very important product where I see a lot of the students have roles to play. Then Marco Principe brought up the whole issue of poverty and marginalization. I think this is one of the things that we've been seeing more and more, that the role of poverty in poor young people is increasing. And finally, again, the issue of IT and social protection for the marginalized, as Michel Iseminger brought up. So now I'm going to open up the floor for a discussion amongst the panelists. So please raise your hand if you want to comment on any of these or add any additional comments. Yes, Michel Fakhri, Professor Fakhri, please.
I'd like to thank everyone today, but I really want to be a bit, I want to push everyone. I mean, that's my role as a special rapporteur. I'm an independent expert. I'm not paid for this position. And it's interesting to talk about digitalization when there's no electricity. It's interesting to talk about youth when they're fleeing the country. It's interesting to talk about policies when there's impunity after the Beirut explosion, to ask people to vote for whom? We know the system. We know the families. We know the leaders. I would encourage everyone to be a bit more grounded and to give people more specifics in their existing reality, not theories and ideas that could sort of float around. So I agree, the government of Lebanon has not invested in agriculture, but that's a global problem, right? Many, what we call developing countries, have not invested enough in their agricultural sector. But I think there's deeper problems here, which we cannot ignore. And to transform a country's food system is how you transform a country. And I want to invite people to be more specific on what human rights and the right to food can mean for people in Lebanon. And I use the phrase people in Lebanon very specifically because the legal status of different people is complicated. There are people without citizenship. There are Palestinian refugees. There are Syrians. There are migrant workers. We all know these problems. Everyone on this panel and everyone listening knows the specificities. So I want to invite everyone to get realistic, to give people listening today something they can actually do and think about. To say digitalization is going to create cynicism when there's no electricity today.
Thank you. I think a couple of the panelists saw that they were being addressed by those very pointed comments. Does anybody want to respond directly? Yes, Maurice Sadeh.
Yes, Professor Fakhri, you're absolutely right. I mean, the current situation is not conducive at all for to think optimistically and so on. But digitalization, first of all, yes, electricity, we have a problem. We hope that it will, I doubt to be resolved anytime soon, but at least alleviated. But we still have internet functioning, hopefully not for a while. And we've seen, irrespective of failure of governments and so on, that many youth are developing applications, not necessarily in the agricultural production, but mostly in the marketing area. And we've seen many attempts at developing applications to bypass the wholesale traders, to link farmers directly to the consumers. For example, marketing of organic food or food baskets. We've seen mobilization by civil society of support to farming communities at the grassroots level. This is, in spite, and it's always been the case, but now more than ever, that the grassroots civil society is still very active in Lebanon, and it's filling the gap of the failure of the government because of many reasons, and particularly because of the absolute lack of resources available now. So the youth are playing an important role. And also because of the economic crisis and unemployment, many youth who have lost their jobs or don't have any job opportunities are moving back to agriculture because they see an opportunity in agriculture, to invest in agriculture. Especially with the devaluation of the pound, agriculture is and will be becoming more competitive. So many entrepreneurs, many youth who have some savings or whose parents own land are moving back into agriculture and investing in agriculture. So it's not a completely gloomy picture, especially in the midterm. I mean, the short term, the crisis is definitely very severe. But agriculture, I strongly believe that in the medium term, agriculture will become more competitive, more attractive for investments, including more participation by the youth and implementation of digital technologies and others. I mean, that's my response. Thank you.
Before I hand it over to you, Your Excellency Al Neme, I just wanted to sum up. I see here two topics you're agreeing on. One is that the grassroots is becoming more and more important through the crisis. The crisis is actually offering us a chance. People are being forced back into agriculture, but they're also using this as a way of focusing on regional and even local politics. And second of all, the link between IT, which is a very modern technology, and farming, and traditional farming, which is part of our cultural heritage. Yes, Your Excellency, Minister Neme.
If I may, as well, if I may intervene, I mean, here at WFP, we in 2020 we are assisted 1.4 million people, and we have started a program of in-kind food assistance where vulnerable families receive food parcels, and most of these food parcels are from in the international market. So initiatives that could link local production with food assistance, with WFP providing directly buying from the local farmers and distributing to the people in need, could be a huge boost for the food sector and for food security in the country. WFP is implementing in many countries the program that is called homegrown school feeding, but I mean the paradigm of the program can be implemented in every type of food assistance. So linking the farmers with the steady supply that comes from WFP, which is investing every month millions of dollars in the country through food assistance, through this program, through its resilience program, can be a huge boost directly for the farmer and increasing their income. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Your Excellency, you wanted to say something. Sorry.
Yes, I would like to raise a few more issues after the intervention of Professor Fakhri. Number one is, in Lebanon, we are very good at doing a lot of plans and very bad at implementing. I'll give you one example, which is not in the agriculture sector I know a little bit more. It is the electricity sector. Since 2004, there has been as many electricity plans as there has been ministers. Every minister would do another plan, and then there would be political bickering because this and that, and we have spent something like we could give electricity to Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and maybe other countries with all the money we lost on electricity, instead of just building some plants to generate electricity and provide electricity 24/24 to Lebanese people. And unfortunately, when I saw the plans that you spoke about agriculture, for me, the end will be the same. It's just another plan. The same way I did an economic plan, I bet you it will stay in a drawer, although most economists state that it was the best economic plan ever. The second point that we are forgetting is mentality of the farmers. Let me give you an example. You probably know that the government of Lebanon has been subsidizing wheat production. And so we were paying X amount of money per hectare or dunum, more precisely, of planted wheat. And one day they came to me and said, we're not getting paid and so on. And I said to them, look, I have an idea. Instead of paying you, I am going to use that money to buy a better type of crops that increases your productivity by 60%. And their response was, no, pay us the money. So instead of going to a better production and being self-sufficient, independent, and so on, no. And the third problem I would like to raise is that, unfortunately, what I have seen in this ministry, corruption is only at the level of politicians. It is across the board, including in agriculture with the farmers. And thank that is across the board that needs to be resolved. So these three problems are not helping us, Professor Fakhri, resolve the issues. And yes, definitely, if we want to have Lebanon go for a knowledge economy, which is really the future of Lebanon, because what do we produce? What did we produce in Lebanon, aside from smart people going to the highest universities in the world and in Lebanon? Very good education system, very good health system. Really, our future is this. Plus, agriculture is needed, of course, but with very high value-added type crops. This is what we need to do. And what do we see today? An education system that is collapsing, a health system that has collapsed, education system as well, I should say, has collapsed. So we are killing today the future of Lebanon, the real future of Lebanon. So I raise these issues just for you to think about them, hoping that the new government will handle these issues and so on and resolve them, because Lebanon needs these problems to be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And before we move on to the last comment from the panel, I just want to remind everybody to please post your questions to the panel in the chat so that we can then follow up on them in the final 10 to 15 minutes. So please, Wafa Dia Hamza, please, your final comments.
Thank you. Just a quick response to what has been raised by Mr. Fakhri. We are in a crisis. We are in a multifold crisis. That's true. Also, at the same time, we are accountable to bring really opportunities for our people, because we are in a public sector, and this is our responsibility. Our responsibility is really pick and work day and night to bring solutions and to think of what really works, to bring our people to something that keeps them surviving and resilient. We cannot just sit and say we have crisis and we can't do anything. That's why we have to think of innovation. We have to think of solutions. Actually, I will give you a few examples of Water Medium project, which is directly addressed to the youth. This is supported from EU, and we are implementing it now in collaboration with the SIAM. This is where there are really beautiful ideas, such as the microfiltration for the water to be drinkable, for example. Another is on the animal waste for pet food, which is under the circular economy. I mean, this is what we have to bring to our people. It's not that only we are living in crisis and we cannot think but of the food. Yes, they have the right to access food, definitely, because this is connected to every single aspect of their livelihood and their good health and also their mental health. I mean, this is absolutely our responsibility. And again, I would like to stress the importance really of to think together collectively on this issue in Lebanon. I am very much for some institutional formation to really bring us out to think all together. We cannot continue on working in silos. We have to work together in an integrated approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we move on to the questions from the audience, I just want to remind everybody that this event is organized by the Regional Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the Middle East and North Africa as part of the monitoring of the rights to food, which is linked to the UN Summit on Dialogue and the International Youth Day. So again, the two main issues for the Regional Office of the OHCHR, monitoring and youth involvement. So I'm now going to be taking the last 10 minutes for questions from the chat. And first question is from Mr. Yassar, who wrote, the reform process does not depend only on one framework without the other frameworks. Policies are of no value if the culture of corruption, bribery, nepotism, and monopoly continues. I'm assuming that this is referring to the culture of impunity and the lack of rule of law. I would just also ask the audience, if you do have a question, if you want to direct it to someone specific, that you also include that. Thank you. So if anybody, feel free to respond to that question. I know that many of you are working on the issue of the culture of impunity and systemic corruption. So how do we deal that? Who speaks through? Can youth actually, when they're working locally, deal with this issue? Would someone like? This is an audience question to all the panelists.
Mr. Raul, go ahead.
If the overall issue of monitoring as in a culture of impunity, I think this is the gist of the question. If I might ask one of the ministers, how do you deal with the culture of impunity, the existing corruption? We are talking about improving the country while we see it disintegrating before our very eyes. How can the youth have hope to deal with this issue?
Eugene,
yes,
in light of the silence, maybe I'll shift the focus to give.
I raised my hand, but you didn't see it. I'm ready to speak.
Sorry,
I don't see
Your Excellency, Mr. Nami, your camera was off. I'll turn it back to you then.
Please, your camera's off. This is.
No, it's on. I don't know why it's not working. Look. Our government has done a law about corruption and fighting corruption, and among other things has proposed a law, more precisely, to the parliament, and waiving banking secrecy across the board in a lot of sectors. Everyone's working with the government, the media, everyone working in the government, all the administrations, and so on. Unfortunately, that law was got in a lot of places by the parliament, and that would have been very important for us to have this law go through, and in order to be able really to fight corruption. As I was saying before, corruption is across the board. The role of the youth, frankly, is a political crisis, is a political crisis. The situation is a political problem. It has to be resolved through politics. So what can the youth do through politics? This is the real question. If it doesn't change, what can the youth do? They can leave the country, and this is what they're doing. And this is what they should not do. They should stay and fight for their future, for their country, and vote once again. How do you resolve that? It's a mentality. Other countries have done it. Other countries have reduced drastically corruption. So it can be done. It's not that it cannot be done, but it starts with independence of justice. The law on independence of justice has been in the parliament for years. How do you fight corruption if you don't have independence of justice? In the law first, and in the mentalities afterward, in reality afterward. How do you fight corruption? You can't. So it has to go through the standard processes of a democratic process. In other countries, it has often been done through, a dictator saying, this is what I'll do. I'll take everybody, put them in prison, and we discuss afterward. Okay, we are not like that in Lebanon. We have some type of democracy. So it needs laws, and it needs implementation of the laws. So it needs first independence of justice. It needs a good law about corruption, not the one we have. And here is where the young people have to act, to be in politics, to get into politics, to get their voice heard. Over.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming that wasn't merely a rhetorical question, but that was directed to Professor Fakhri. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I'm in agreement on many points with Mr. Name, except to ask the youth to fight and people to fight. They've been doing it since the October uprising. And we see the families of the port explosion. They went down to voice their concerns peacefully, and they were met with tear gas. Yani, what more can we ask from people beyond they tried voting, they tried participating, they tried peaceful protest, they tried social uprising. To use Arabic, ba'din, I mean, right? So here's a solution, is the international community also plays a role. And this is what I've been doing from my end, is to call for an international investigation of the port. That's what needs to happen from the Human Rights Council. It needs to be multilateral. It can't be this country or that country working bilaterally or regionally. It has to come from the Human Rights Council, but then justice must be local in Lebanon. So special rapporteurs, we collectively, we were 30, we signed a letter last year. We're mobilizing again this year with other organizations for the next session of the Human Rights Council to call for an international investigation, not a trial, not the mess that was the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. That was a disaster. An investigation that then lays out the record officially and then hands it over to the local institutions. And this is where I think Mr. Nami and I see eye to eye, to empower the domestic institutions to recognize the record. That's something we can do. That's a campaign people can build around to put pressure on the Human Rights Council. How is it that a near nuclear explosion happened and the international community did not respond with an investigation, whereas we see the international community respond to one princess disappearing? This is absurd. This is absurd. Shame on the international community. Shame on the Human Rights Council, right? So it's both. It has to be domestic and international.
Professor,
thank you very
I have to agree with you and to add something.
Please.
Number one, the information I have is that FBI did an investigation and we don't have the results. And France did an investigation and we don't have the results. And we didn't get the satellite images. But I might be wrong, but there is already an international investigation. I am all for an international investigation, not a tribunal, as you say. I fully agree. Are perfectly right. But I would like to point to something you said. Yes, people have been in the street, but not with the same voice. Not with the same voice. Again, political divide. One group here, one group there, one group. You put 3 Lebanese together, they cannot agree on a plan. Look what happened. Beirut Madinati at the municipal elections. They got 34% of the votes. Then came the parliamentary election. They were divided. How? This cannot happen. When you have the young people, they have to agree on the same agenda, not in words, in reality. This is why, in my opinion, things are not moving. And now people that are on the street and breaking things and around and so on, these are not the real young people that are fighting for Lebanon. These we are not. In the beginning, they were on the streets and so on, yes. But what is their agenda? I know a lot of people that were with them, going with them in the streets. And then now they said, hey, it's not what we wanted. So the young people have to have an agenda and do it. Okay. Over.
Thank you. I want to give 2 more audience members a chance to ask questions. One is Elizabeth Sufi, who is asking about the link between agricultural and the new technologies. And how can youth play a role? This is a topic that I'm very interested in, although I'm not much of a techie myself. How can young people link the low tech of traditional agriculture with the high tech of the global economy? And the second one is also from Aya Nasser, the whole role of the brain drain and the fact that we're losing our young people. I would like to add in that question, does this also offer us an opportunity because of the diaspora? We know that Lebanon has one of the largest diasporas per capita. So these 2 questions, again, were directed to the entire panel. Please feel free to respond, and then we'll move on to the second hour. Who would like to respond to the brain drain question? And who would like to respond to the IT local agricultural question? Just if you can have any responses, please.
I can give a very quick response. I know at least 2 projects of hydroponic production. that has developed in Lebanon. And this has been done by Lebanese people. And you have all the production that has been done on a biotype level as well. All these projects have been done by young people in the agriculture sector and not by, the traditional farmers. These people were not in farming, and this is what they did, and that was great. But unfortunately, we cannot use drones in Lebanon easily, while drone technology for agriculture could be extremely helpful.
Thank you. The question of the brain drain and the role of the diaspora, can somebody comment on that before we move on to the second hour? If nobody else, could I ask you, Professor Fakhri, how you see the role of the Lebanese diaspora, knowing that you're a leading voice of the Lebanese diaspora? And by the way, your legal agenda article is absolutely amazing. I've become a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this peculiar position where I am Lebanese. I mean, I'm not hiding that. I'm proud of that's what allowed me to do this job, and I do it well because I'm speaking from experience. And I'm from we're originally from Min Sharib. We're apple orchard. That's my father's retirement. We can't sell to Libya dollars. Like, that's a reality. So I have a stake in this, in that sense, and I understand what's going on. And my family's still there, so I am a product of the diaspora. That's why my Arabic is so terrible these days. So, what to do? This is always the question. What is to be done? And what my passion comes from the encouragement is we always end up talking in a circle, right? The problem is political. It's always been political since forever, right? And in the second half, I'll identify. I don't think the solution comes from a clever idea. It's, and I'm pleased. I'm looking at the chats. People have the knowledge, have the ideas. As His Excellency Mr. Nami says, we have plan after plan after plan. Our biggest export is people, right? We know this. And it's for me, the inspiration comes from the October uprising. That was a moment when people came together in a singular way. And it wasn't to agree. What they did is they met each other in the streets for the first time, face to face, as people. Oh, sorry, did I disappear? That's what I keep thinking about, is how to use that moment in October when people were in the streets peacefully teaching each other, listening to each other for the first time in Lebanon's history, right? That's the moment that I think all of us should use as an inspiration, where those were our leaders in the streets. And what was the response again? Violence, tear gas, arrests, beatings. This is the reality, is that moment of October, and that moment we can't take away from the youth. The youth have that moment. That's theirs. That moment where they were honest with each other and there was disagreement, and from that disagreement there was learning and change and new relationships. Not new ideas, new relationships is where I see things. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the first round. I agree with you on this point as well. I mean, the OHCHR is working with 10 universities here in Lebanon on specifically these issues. And they're playing a very important role on the relationship level, because it is often very difficult for 10 universities to actually work together. So for those of you who have joined us in the last hour, I just want to repeat that this event is organized by the Regional Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights in the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region. And it's part of the monitoring of human rights and food, and is connected to the UN Food Summit and dialogue related to the International Youth Day, which brings us together to talk about these two topics, monitoring and youth involvement and youth awareness. Now, I have a question to one of the topics which is on a lot of people's minds, which is the new National Agricultural Strategy. I have to admit, I didn't read the whole thing from cover to cover, but I thought it was very, very groundbreaking and a fundamental change. And I have to agree with His Excellency Raul Neme, Minister Raul Neme, that it is one of the best things I've seen in the last 22 years that I've been here. My Arabic is also not very good. And I too come from an agricultural background. My grandparents started a food processing plant in Pennsylvania for Swiss and Austrian food specialties. So I agree with you, Professor Fakhri, that when you're rooted in the industry, you also have more of a personal involvement. Now, in the second round, I'm going to ask a specific targeted question to each of the panelists, and you've gotten these questions in advance, and then we'll have a follow-up amongst the panel and then a final follow-up Q&A. So the first question, which actually was written for the Minister of Agriculture, but I think that Wafa Al-Dia, as his advisor, you would be able to deal with this, because you did play a big role in drafting the NAS. And the question is, was the National Agricultural Strategy, at least partially, a response to the so-called national uprising or the Thawra in 2019? And now the question is, has it attempted to include farmers, consumers, and civil society in its implementation? So not only the drafting of the law as a response to the Thawra, but now the implementation. Is it reaching out to producers, consumers, and civil society as it goes along? Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I will go with the flow and continue in English. In fact, I was a member of the core team who collaborated in the drafting of this strategy, National Agriculture Strategy 2020-2025, and with experts, also a group of experts from FAO. So in fact, this strategy is a response, yes. It is a response to the crisis in Lebanon, and at the same time, it provides also a sustainable vision for the agriculture and the agri-food sector in the country. So in this sense, we can say, because we have, it is mainly focused on 5 axes, which quickly, if I want to read in English, just try to reach the 5 axes, which are the pillars, in fact. The main one, which is responding to the crisis, it focuses on restoring the livelihoods of and the productive capacities of the farmers and producers, for which we have been collaborating with so many donor countries and international organizations to provide the support, direct support to farmers to be able to be resilient and to sustain their production nowadays. So, and it has been like kicked off since mid-2020, this support program. And we are bringing, and thanks to the efforts of our really main partner, the FAO, and Dr. Maurice Saadi, who is really the main mobilizing of the funding for the sector, supporting the ministry, in order to bring this emergency support program to be implemented and to be financed, of course, from different organizations and donors. The second pillar, quickly, is the working on the increasing the agriculture production and productivity, which is really, it responds to our this lack of between what we produce and what we export and what we import. So as a direct response to reducing the importation bill, and at the same time working on the quality and increasing the competitiveness in the third pillar for different value chains that they have the added value. The fourth pillar, which is focusing on the climate change adaptation and sustainable management of the agri-food system and natural resources, through shifting to solar energy, expanding water resources for irrigation, and promoting sustainable use of natural resources. And definitely the main focus here would be on the use of renewable energy in the agriculture sector. And the fifth pillar, which is really the integrated with all the 4 pillars, is the strengthening the enabling institutional environment, which is really the core, which is the governance dimension, which we discussed in the first question. And this is really, it focuses a lot on the importance of the good governance and importance of this interministerial collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second question to Minister Al-Naimi. and you were also there when this National Agricultural Strategy was drafted. And my question to you is, should the NAS include farmers, consumers, and civil society in its implementation, or should it rely largely on market forces? This whole issue of the economy and the global economy as the driving force, and ultimately the customers for the products and how much should the local producers and consumers be involved in the implementation of the NAS? Please, the floor is yours. Your Excellency.
Look, ideally, the answer to your question, yes, they should be involved, definitely. But the question is how. I would go again. In my discussion with farmers, I had a lot of discussion with farmers because of the subsidy programs. They were always coming to see me and so on. What I saw is a lot of diversities in opinions and in the way to approach problems. And if we want this plan to succeed, we need a buy-in from the politicians, we need a buy-in from the farmers as well, from the civil society, from people that are really on the ground. But we have to look as well at the entire chain of production. Okay, we do fruits, and then what? We export them. We have an agro industry to use them. So we cannot look only, I am producing products. Is what do I do with it? How do I promote export? How do I renegotiate with Europe the agreements that we have that are really not very good? They are not at all in our favor. They are in favor of Europe. And the same with Arab countries and so on. What do we do? It's very nice to produce, but then what? So this is why it's important to have the buy-in, but to have as well not only an agricultural plan. The agricultural plan has to be consistent with the whole economic plan, including industry, including export, import approaches, and so on. So this is my opinion, and it's not an easy thing to do. In the meantime, the government has the responsibility to start implementing, not only to have a plan, but really to start implementing. Over.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, the next question is the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Professor Michel Fakhri. Having read some of your articles online, they're hard to miss, I must say. You had a very catchy phrase. You recently wrote, "You have one foot in Beirut and the other in Bandung." Please explain the significance of the terms food sovereignty and how it relates to food security, because food security is a topic we're all talking about, and it's in the name of all of the documents. But food sovereignty is possibly also a more political topic, which I think speaks to the needs. And I know that food sovereignty is a big issue in Italy as well, so maybe we can come back to that in the following discussion. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eugene. So Bandung, what I meant by Bandung is the Bandung Conference. The spirit of Bandung is something people talk about. It was a moment when people across Asia and Africa achieved independence, obtained independence, and it was a wave of optimism that spread across the world. And so despite all the differences around the world, there was a shared commitment to fight imperialism, whether it was European, American, or at the time Soviet. Later, that turns into things like the non-aligned movement and the Tricontinental Conference. Now, unfortunately, today, many governments still use anti-imperialist arguments to oppress their own people. In our region, we're familiar with this rhetoric. But what the spirit of Bandung was about was people-to-people solidarity. And that spirit of people-to-people solidarity is still alive today in the form of social movements committed to food sovereignty. So food security is based on the idea that experts can sit down and figure out what is needed to ensure everyone has enough food. A food security approach starts with nutritionists, economists, lawyers, policymakers to make the major decisions, and then it becomes a question of buy-in and implementation. Food sovereignty frames the issue in terms of power and control. It puts forward the idea that people and communities should decide for themselves what their food system should be like. It empowers local food producers, farmers, peasants, fishers, pastoralists, women, workers, youth, the people that are the most essential to our food system, as we're learning in COVID, who's essential. They should be leading everybody else. So right now, Lebanon is built on this idea of a national pact at the heart of its political system, and that's part of the problem. In the recent article I wrote for Legal Agenda, and I'll post the link in the chat part, I introduced the idea of a national food pact. I wonder that might sort of address Madame Hamzi's point of trying to get cohesive interministerial coordination. Some sort of national food dialogue, and bringing in the universities in this regard, I think is key. And I outline it in more detail in the article. A national food pact would be the result of all these constituents and really everyone living in Lebanon coming together and working out what sort of food system do we want. It's an open question. The National Food Pact then could be used by people to hold their governments accountable, to hold international organizations accountable. And I know that local farmers, fishers, and pastoralists in Lebanon cannot go on in Lebanon, but people in Lebanon can consume everything that's locally produced. What we haven't talked about today is the rise of hunger that started before COVID, because of the financial crisis. So I don't know why we keep focusing on export when we're not feeding our own people first. But the other thing about connecting local producers to local people, this deepens the connection amongst people with each other. And it deepens their relationship with the land, the rivers, and the sea. It's an ecological relationship. It's not just about commerce. So food sovereignty is a way of thinking about food as something that makes people stronger physically, but also politically and culturally. My God, the other thing we export is our food in Lebanon, if I may use the possessive for a moment, right? It's not just another sector that provides export opportunities. It's how all people define who they are. How you eat is how you define who you are. So to turn back to this notion of people-to-people solidarity, in Lebanon, farmers can reach out to other farmers who are experiencing food sovereignty from other countries. Pastoralists and fishers can do the same. Food sovereignty is an international social movement made up of millions of people from around the world. And there are organizations in the UN that can help. The FAO is one of them. The FAO has a relationship with food sovereignty as an idea, with agroecology as an idea, as programs. And the other organization, I'll end here, is the Committee on World Food Security, also in Rome, can help local Lebanese producers make these transnational people-to-people connections. So, and then I put myself forward. I have, I have these contacts, and I am positioned in these international organizations. I'm willing to work with local universities to push in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You brought up two key issues. The one is that's probably not been dealt with enough up until now, considering its importance in agriculture, is the role of women, which I would hope will come up a little bit later, not only in food production, but more recently also in merchandising, especially online. And the second one is the whole South-South dialogue. And I'd now like to move on to Maurice Sade, country representative for the Food and Agriculture Organization, and ask you, I know that you have been active in many different countries around the world, but your focus is now in Lebanon. But I would like to ask, based on your extensive experience with food security and agriculture situation in Lebanon, how can we involve youth in this cause? How can we promote South-South dialogue in food exchange and experience exchange, focusing on youth, the whole issue of learning from other parts of the global South?
Well, thank you very much. But first, allow me, we talked about youth earlier, but allow me to go back to several points raised regarding the National Agricultural Strategy and the point about food sovereignty that Dr. Fakhri raised. We are facing a situation in Lebanon where all four pillars of food security are gradually collapsing. The four pillars are availability through domestic production or through imports. The second is access, and the affordability of food. And the third pillar is utilization, how nutritious the food and save the food that we're eating. And the fourth pillar of the above three pillars. And all those four pillars are being severely shaken by the current crisis. And so when we talk about the National Agricultural Strategy, we're focusing primarily on availability, on the production side. But yet we import close to 85% of our food. So even if the agricultural strategy is very successful, let's say doubling the production, domestic production, we will reach at maximum 30% of our food needs. But what happens to the other 70%? We'll continue to importing those food. So agriculture can be part of the solution to food security, but will not solve the food security situation in Lebanon. And we're also faced by a severe shortage of government funding. We cannot rely on government subsidies or government support anymore. I mean, this is, to be realistic, everybody acknowledges that. So we need to rely either on international community, on the donors, and or on the private sector to enhance our food security. But what the issue is, this reliance on imports means that we have to either rely on food assistance from WFP, which WFP already mentioned, and because of the current situation, the collapsing of the purchasing power, we may need to move into massive food assistance. But also, Michelle mentioned the ESSN, the cash transfer program, which is currently under debate by the government, and hopefully that will be approved very soon in order for, because of the removal of the fuel subsidies and other subsidies that could support the purchasing power of people. But I want to mention specifically the food subsidies. We know that the previous food subsidies were not very efficient, the food basket, and that now has been almost eliminated. But I want to focus on the bread subsidies. I mean, if we remove all subsidies, simply because the central bank does not have the foreign exchange and the government does not have the resources, but if we talk about the minimum right to food, I think the people in Lebanon have the minimum right to have access to bread. I mean, I'm talking here realistically. And if we remove the subsidies on bread, people will not be able to eat and we might risk the risk of starvation. And the food subsidies are a small fraction of the total subsidies that the government provides, whether to fuel or to medication or even to mobile telephones. So I take my position here with the presence of Minister Nami is to urge that we do not touch on the bread subsidy, because once the bread subsidies are gone, then we will have a severe risk of the most vulnerable populations in Lebanon to be severely affected. Sorry, I deviated from the question, but I wanted to raise that point. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully,
may I say a word about
ad hoc, 30 seconds.
First, the bread subsidy is not done by our ministry, it's done by the central bank. So far, they continue subsidizing the wheat, but they don't subsidize the fuel for bread and so on, or the other products that follow market prices. This is why the price of the bread have gone up drastically from 1,500 Lebanese pound to 5,000. And once the subsidy on the fuel will be entirely removed, then it will go even higher, which is a big problem. The real solution is a good social safety net, and our ministry has done a lot of work on this with the World Bank. Since August 2020, we issued a plan, and unfortunately now we're doing something like a quarter of that plan. Over.
Thank you. Maybe another issue might be the role of organized labor. I know that some of you have brought this up in the past, that actually when farm workers and industrial workers have unions, things change as well as far as their social security. Okay, we're moving on now to Marco Principe, Head of Research, Assessment and Monitoring at the World Food Program. And I would like to ask you, what is going wrong in Lebanon with respect to monitoring of the food security policies? Often Lebanon has excellent laws, but they're not implemented well, and part of implementation is obviously monitoring. What role does the Lebanese system of sectarianism play in promoting a culture of impunity? and thus undermining rule of law. So the whole issue of what good are excellent laws when we don't have proper monitoring and implementation. Thank you. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I can speak in the perspective of WFP and would like to mention 2 points. First of all, regarding the monitoring of the food security situation in the country, what we lack is nationally defined tools to measure the food security based on the global dimensions. And this, despite data might be available, there is a lack of consensus and a lack of shared analysis between the main stakeholder of food security on what the food security levels in the country are. And this I can bring, for example, the example of the integrated phase classification analysis, which could bring an understanding and consensus over the food security situation in Lebanon. From WFP, we are also working along with partners, and especially the World Bank, to conduct a Lebanese vulnerability assessment for the Lebanese population, because the last data that are available on the level of poverty are from more than 10 years ago. And this assessment will provide an updated socioeconomic picture of the Lebanese population and the effect of the economic crisis. And we expect it to have it by the second part of 2020. As well, we need to work closely with the central administration for statistics to develop the capacity in the collection and analysis of the data. The second point, which is my main job here at WFP, is to ensure that we identify the right people for assistance. And this, with the lack of data, it's not a very easy task. And we are working together with the Ministry of Social Welfare in the implementation of the National Social Protection Program, for example, the NPTP, to ensure that assistance and social protection is directed to the right way, to the poorest part of the population, as well as monitoring that this food assistance is actually consumed by the population and there are no diversion of assistance. And I know this is just a small drop in the ocean, just a small part. But we are trying to do our part in ensuring the monitoring through our activities. Thank you.
You didn't want to speak on the issue of sectarianism and how that might play a role?
I think that's the lack of data. I mean, the last census in this country. I mean, I've been here for only a month, but my main issue is actually looking for population data and finding where people are and using this data in order to support, I mean, the WFP food assistance programs. So, I mean, to me, yes, that's the main way on how sectarianism affect statistics. Thank you.
Well, there's the old saying that there's lies, damned lies, and statistics in that order. We don't have that problem in Lebanon. Sort of a feedback loop that starts at the top again. So our final speaker in the first round is Ms. Michelle Izaminga from the World Food Program. And I would like to ask you, wrapping up, how can we bring in youth? And I have a personal suggestion, but I just want to bounce off of you. I know that it was discussed in the preparations. How can young people in Lebanon be included in the struggle? And I'm speaking here as a struggle, indeed, to monitor food security policies, because the laws could be excellent. How can a struggle to fight for monitoring? And I've noticed that kids sometimes are more interested in having the laws applied than are their parents, ironically. Are you familiar, now my question, are you familiar with the fair trade movement? And could this be a tool to promote youth inclusion especially in schools and universities. We're working here at NDU and at several other universities as in a project on fair trade universities and schools. So can you think of some ideas how we can help youth in the jihad, in the struggle for monitoring food policies, please?
Yes, thank you. I do think there's a place for young people and all types of people to be involved in monitoring and keeping their government accountable. Likely entry points would be at the university. The university arena is often an area where young people get their first taste of joining a movement, organizing for change, being vocal and advocating, but also for those who are in the workforce, joining through different organizations, whether it's, since we're talking a lot about in the second part of the question about fair trade, different agricultural associations, local political groupings that are happening. So I think there is room for that, for people to get involved, to use the internet, to have blogs, to get their voice and their points of view out there. Turning to the issue on the fair trade, I'm not an expert in fair trade, but I got the question last night, so I did do some reflection on there, and I have a couple ways to think about it. Like, on the one hand, again, and the fair trade is really focusing again on the availability aspect of food security, again, about production. So again, it's not really going to cover everything, but it is a tool and it's a valuable resource used in many countries, because the heart of the fair trade movement is to have an organizational trading platform, approach, interaction that brings production closer to the consumer in such a way that producers who are often disadvantaged can get an equal or more equal playing field, and hopefully reduce any type of impact of, say, poverty in the deep rural areas where a lot of times access to markets and good prices are hard to come by. So I think the fair trade movement is an acceptable and it's an advantageous approach. But I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate in the sense that, yes, getting curriculum through vocational training would be great. Using the university sphere to get people more interested in participating in agriculture. There's an organization that we partner with called Berry Tech. They're very much involved in innovation and entrepreneurialism and marketing. And they have had a series of food security, food systems conversations over the last year or two. And they are always encouraging young people to get involved. But when we get into the actual production, the actual elements that make fair trade, you can look at the products coming out. So the complications in this have to do with, what about the access to water? You can't do agriculture to produce products to get into fair trade if there's a water shortage problem, or if there's a energy problem that prevents irrigation to fields. There's an issue about access to credit. One of the reasons why some of the rural producers are joining agricultural associations and want to do fair trade is because they're struggling against good prices and poverty. They can't invest in getting involved in producing products that would eventually get certified for fair trade because they don't have access to credit. This alludes to the banking crisis, the environment, the economic crisis that we've talked about already. Another issue with regard to complications for advancing the fair trade for young people who are trying to get into the business, the energy, whether it's renewable, even if people wanted to get into renewable energy, you still need to have financing available for the inputs to get it up and going. And then the final thing has to do about the labor wages of agriculture. And while fair trade is a mechanism that allows for, specific labeling of products, you get designations, it contributes to the the marketability. I mean, I think it was mentioned that, Lebanon exports its food. Everybody, globally knows Lebanon has a gastronomy, a culinary specificity and history. These things are all well and good, and getting fair prices and whatnot. But if the wage labor laws are not made in such a way to give a livable wage for the farmers, the route to fair trade and the benefits of it can be hindered. So all in all, I do think I support it. In terms of the diaspora that I mentioned earlier also, yes, I think young people, similar, I've learned a lot of things from the Berry Tech conversations, like they do network out with through WhatsApp and FaceTime, Facebook and LinkedIn. There's all kinds of ways that people can share information and join together. But some of the basics needed are the inputs to create the products needed to get into fair trade. Young people are facing some high hurdles, whether it's renewable energy, access to credit, water resourcing and irrigation, and then the basic labor laws for wages. Thank you.
Right. I think you just illustrated there the advantage of fair trade in that it forces young people to deal with all of those issues that you just mentioned and the complexity of actually going into business. For those of us who come from families who are in business, we know that actually business people are sometimes not that able to sleep in the evening, and agriculture is a very rewarding but very tough business. I just wanted to say that Minister Raul Neme has had to leave at 11:30, so he's no longer here. However, we have a special guest, Inaya Ezzedine, who's the chair, who's an MP in the Lebanese parliament and the chair of the Committee for Women and Children, and who we know very well because she's very active also in the area of oil and natural gas, and commissioned a study specifically on the role of youth and women in the field of oil and natural gas. And one of the issues that came up here today was STEM for girls, STEM for women, how to get women involved in technology on both ends of the production scale. So MP Ezzedine, are you here? I saw her joining. If she would like to join us for a brief comment, speaking from Parliament. Yes. So, Dr. Inaya Ezzedine, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much first for inviting me to this meeting and for giving me the opportunity to contribute now with my intervention. I wanted to say something about the first session, actually, when I noticed that a lot has been said about agriculture and the right to food, and a little bit was said about the role of legislation in the whole governance structure and ensuring a sustainable and inclusive right to food. And thank you, Mr. Fakhri and Dr. Saadi, for mentioning in the second session the food security and its all with its four dimensions. We know that agriculture is only a small percentage of the first dimension of food security, which is the availability of food. And we know that most of our food is imported. And this is why we should talk about food security and the food system in all its dimension, which is the accessibility to food, the usage of food with relationship to health and the health burden, and the sustainability of all the above parameters. And besides the Committee on Women and Children, for the last few months, the head also of the SDG committee in the Parliament. And we have been working actually on the food security as a bridge or a path that would lead us to the right to food. We don't have a legislation in the Parliament that says the right to food. Actually, we have a lot of, we have been doing a legislative and policy framework analysis that govern the food security, and we discovered that we have a lot of laws that govern the first parameter, which is the availability of food, because most of it is imported and it has to do with trade, with commerce, with business, but whereas the other parameters are also are not given as much attention, especially the second and the third. Now we are working on the third, and I think as a result of this work that we are doing extensively and intensively, we will come up with a legislative agenda for food security that ultimately can lead us to have a framework for a right to food. And if we have to put it in our national action plan for the human rights, I can say it has been absent so far from our national action plan on human rights, on the Human Rights Charter. But now we are reviewing the action plan, and we are introducing it under the second No Hunger SDG. And we can collaborate with whoever wants to collaborate with us to establish a legislative framework and an institutional setup for the right to food, where governance, where laws are a big part of the governance structure, and that can also govern the intersectoral collaboration and relationship that are related to food, because food is not only in the agriculture, it's in the environment, it's in health, it's in the economy, it's also in the finance. So we have to establish this legislative framework that is so far absent. For the first dimension, we have a lot of good laws that have not been applied. Some of them need amendments, some of them need oversight and scrutiny for the previous government and for any coming government. We have a lot of committees of agencies that if they have been activated and active before, they could have saved us a lot of problems. Now, when it comes to youth, I think they have a very important role with their innovative mind, whether they are the savvy generation as far as digitization and information technology. And we can make use of all these skills to motivate, to improve, to promote agriculture and farmers, to make some saving on a lot of waste that is going in the agriculture sector, from production to marketing, and we can promote also the skills of the farmers. But any policy, any legislation has to be really inclusive of all the layers of society, especially women and children. So far, when we have austerity measures, we know that these two categories suffer more and most among other populations.
Dr. Naya, can I just ask one specific question about what you just mentioned last? I mean, a lot of people know you as a politician and as a professor, but you're also a physician. You're also a medical doctor.
Yes.
And I would like to ask you specifically in your responsibility for women, what role can we play, all of us, whether we're professors, UN experts, politicians, or activists, to promote women in this area? And the second question is that Professor Fakhri brought up this issue of a national food charter, a national food pact that could integrate all of the things you mentioned. Would you be supportive of a national food pact or national food charter for Lebanon?
Of course I will. I think the whole work I'm doing right now, Dr. Saadi, he was with us on 2 of our meetings, extensive, long meetings, the parliament. We are doing, I think, work that has never been done in Lebanon at the level of the legislative level, of course, and we are very ambitious towards setting in the legislation framework the right to food that has to be mentioned like this. We can find the framework, we call it loi cadre, for right to food, as right to water, right to health. I think these are basic human rights. They have to be set clearly, but we cannot reach them unless we have this collaborative intersectoral approach, because everyone is related to the other, related to water, related to economy, as we mentioned, related to environment with all its aspect of environment. This is extensive work, but this is how work should be done in order to ensure sustainability and inclusion. And I think, despite the gloomy atmosphere we live in, if we start the reform this way at the level bottom up, I think this is an opportunity for a new Lebanon, Lebanon for all human beings, for citizens who live equally, who have equal rights set at all levels of the governance structure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to, for those who came late, just remind everybody that this event is organized by the Regional Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights for the Middle East and North Africa, and it's part of the monitoring dialogue on food security, focusing on International Youth Day. And just so I get this in, because I know some people are leaving, I specifically want to thank Lynn Aid and Tamara Boushaheen for the amazing work they've been doing, working with youth in Lebanon. When I was approached to help host this, I was excited because I know of the amazing work that the OHCHR is doing, specifically involving schools and universities. So we have a couple of minutes for a dialogue on the panel, and then I have a lot of questions from the audience. So does anybody want to respond specifically to something that has been said by one of the other audience participants? Please raise your hand in the camera so I can see you. That would be the easiest way. Yes, Dr. Fakhri.
I just want to comment on Dr. Azzuddin. This just sounds very promising and exciting in the midst of all this sort of doom and gloom. And hopefully, I look forward to see what is achieved. And I sort of want to just emphasize something Dr. Azzuddin mentioned. Also, it's not just about the laws, but the institutions that come with those laws. And that's where politics happens. That's where implementation happens, and that's where people. That's the interface of people with their government, with each other, and that's the difficulty is not just the laws, but creating those institutions that are autonomous, that serve the people. So it sounds very promising, and I look forward to see the final result.
I also want to say that I'm excited about this. I know Dr. Inaya several years now, and when she just puts her mind to something, it happens. She was the one who initiated all of the work that's been done on gender and youth in the area of oil and natural gas. And we did a research project, and it's because of her that the whole issue of gender and extractive industries is even being discussed. Otherwise, it was a non-topic. And so if she's going to support this idea of a food charter, a food pact, I see things moving along. Not quickly, because we're in Lebanon, but indeed. Any other questions or comments from the panel with each other? Otherwise, I have I have a lot of questions from the audience. The first one is from Nadine Cooley. I'll sum it up because it was a long question. How can youth come up with alternatives if they have seen in the past that when they come up with alternatives that they're being ignored by the so-called sulta or the power elite? The power long record of encouraging civil society and youth to come up with ideas, but when they do, they're ignored. And I think that's a good thing because it proves that we're a democracy. In other countries in the region, we would disappear. Here, we're allowed to complain and then we're ignored. So with youth, why would youth come up with ideas if the sulta is ignoring them? That goes to the entire panel. Do we have any hope that the power elite is going to respond to good suggestions from the grassroots in the coming years? Are we in? Yes, please. Dr. Inaya.
Yes. I think despite all this, youth suffering from this or complaining about this, I think, let me tell you one thing we have started this year in the Committee of Women and Children Parliamentary Committee. We started for the first time to have public hearing sessions about a specific topic. And this is done for the first time in the Parliament. It's true that sometimes we invite experts and NGOs to discuss specific draft laws that are present in the Parliament, but for the first time, we had to do it online because of the lockdown. We chose a topic which is the economic security of women, which is at the table now. During the pandemic, it was at the table because a lot of women suffered in a disproportionate way compared to the other population. And we invited whoever, SMEs, women in business, NGOs, even individuals who have some, who are suffering, who can want to tell us, who have propositions and recommendations. These hearing sessions did not finish yet. We still have one session with the group of women who requested to come to the parliament. And then we will issue the report based on the recommendations that were given by the different groups we met. They explained their difficulties, the barriers they are facing, and we will issue recommendations. Some of them will be legislatives, others will be to the executive level, and maybe to the community. But I have to tell you that surprisingly, not a lot of people participated in this exercise or in this activity. Everybody wants to participate. They talk about it, but once we invite them, they don't participate as we expected. I think this is maybe this needs some practice, some culture. The culture. Because we hear a lot of people complaining, sometimes insulting, sometimes saying that there are no enough participation. But once we offer them the floor to participate, they did not participate enough. So I think this is both ways. Or some people became prisoners of the idea that we don't want to collaborate with the parliament or with this institution. This is the institution of the people. It's not the institution of the MPs. So, and people, whenever they see a door open, I think they should come in and participate. There is no interest for anybody to destroy or to weaken the institutions further. And I tell the youth, they can express their opinion in the voting process next time in the elections. I mean, we cannot eradicate everything because this is
Dr. Anaya, we have a 2-minute limit. Okay.
Oh, I'm done.
We have a 2-minute limit on talks. Dr. Fakhri, and then I have several questions that I need to get to. Yes.
I've already 30 seconds. I'll give the floor to Madam Hamzi. I already spoke, so I'll wait till after her.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, I want to comment on the issue raised by earlier on the role of women and how really we can help and increase her participation and involvement in the sector. So this is something really I see it within this crisis very crucial. We need to focus more not only on the dimensions related to the technical aspects of women's role in the sector. They have a lot of potentialities, and here, as we talk about their involvement, we talk about also the importance of their group work, which is through the cooperatives, and many successful interventions and projects through this. Some are exporting even food to outside Lebanon. Exports really should continue, I see, because this is the way to really bring cash, foreign currency to the country. So we have to balance always with what we produce and what we export. And this is really one of the policy orientations that we need to agree upon. We cannot continue only production for local consumption. We don't have this leisure, in fact. Just between quotations. But going back to the gender element, we really want to focus more on the cultural barriers, because this has been really an issue preventing women from affecting equality and violence against women or gender-based violence issues the comprehension of women's role at the family level. I mean, these all are really areas that we need to focus on, integrated in any intervention related to economic empowerment for females and women in the country. And thank you.
I want to just sum up several questions because we have a lot. And some of them come together on the issue of intersectionality and three issues. One is gender, one is social class, and the third is region. I'm getting a note that my connection is unstable. I don't know if you can hear me. Women play a huge role and always have played a huge role in agriculture. But agricultural workers per se are not well organized and not well protected by the law. And in Lebanon, we know this is particularly the case, especially in certain regions. So what can be done to help women, agricultural workers, and underdeveloped regions so that the women in agricultural will have a stronger position in the future? That's sort of summing up several of the questions that I got. So social class, region, and gender. I know it's a tall order. Who would like to? Yes, Maurice Sade, please.
Yes, the role of women is a very important issue in Lebanon. You mentioned labor laws. As most of you might know, the current labor laws do not apply to agricultural labor in terms of minimum salary, in terms of working conditions, etc., with the exception maybe for child labor. And also, as we all know, the agricultural labor, particularly seasonal labor, is predominantly Syrian or foreign labor. But women have a very, what we call a hidden role, particularly the women farmers, the spouses, the sisters, the daughters, and so on. And most of the time, they do perform the bulk of the work, apart from the manual work, which is during harvesting and so on. Whereas the men are the owners, are the official, they are the face in front of the government and so on. And I think we need to recognize that very important role that Lebanese women farmers, not necessarily the laborers, but the women farmers, whether they are heading or managing the farm themselves, or whether they play a very important role in doing the work on the farm, whether it's related to food processing, whether it's related to management of livestock, in addition to their role within the household. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that role. And in terms of targeting our programs and so on, to target those women in terms of whether it's financial support, whether it's extension support, whether it's support to financially manage the operations, because these women, most of the time, they do the day-to-day operations either in support of their husbands, or mostly they are doing the bulk of the work, and the husband kind of, or the sons, appear from time to time. And this is also important from the perspective of the regions, especially the remote regions, those regions that have been, neglected. We're talking about Akkar, about northern Bekaa and the south, where many of the men are they work in other sectors, and the women are left behind to do the bulk of the management of the work, with the exception maybe during the peak season. So I fully agree that the role of women is very important. And also I want to raise a final point, relationship between the role of women and the digitalization of agriculture. Particularly, there's a big role for younger women, because digital agriculture or digital marketing provide a solution, partial solution to the traditional constraints for women to move around. And if they work from home, using digital agriculture to market their products and to get access to technology and so on, that's very important. We should stop thinking about IT experts as the boy nerds. There are lots of girl nerds who are willing to learn and make use of the opportunities that are provided by digital technology. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you can hear me, because it says here that I have an unstable connection.
Hello, everyone. I think Dr. Eugene just lost his connection. We're just going to give him 1 minute for him to connect back. Dr. Fakhri, in the meantime, if you had anything to say, oh, okay, Dr. Eugene is back. Dr. Eugene?
Amazing in 4 hours that we only lost connection once. For those of us who've been teaching online for the last 2 years, that's close to a miracle. First of all, I just wanted to thank all our speakers. I wanted to also thank Ms. Ruwaida Al-Haj, who's the regional representative of the OHCHR in the MENA, and our 2 colleagues, Lynn Aid and Tamara Boushaheen, who are colleagues in many projects that our university works on. I want to thank Wafa Al-Dia from the Ministry of Agriculture, Raul Naime, who had to leave early, a special rapporteur, Michel Fakhri, who plays a double role as a professor and a UN official, and is doing, for us, universities, a very interesting job. Maurice Sade, country representative of food and agriculture. Marco Principe, head of research and assessment and monitoring at the World Food Program, and Michelle Iseminger from the head of the World Food Program. All of you for your very valuable contributions. The integration of youth and monitoring, I think, became very clear. And I'm looking forward to future work between our universities here in Lebanon, the United Nations bodies, and as Dr. Inaya said, the elected government officials are the ones who speak in the name of the people. Civil society is important, grassroots is important, but they're not elected. The parliamentarians are elected to speak for us, the people. So I think that's important to keep that institutional link intact. And even when it doesn't work very well, we can't stop demanding that the parliament and the government work in the name of the people. It should never be the civil society who takes over that role. So thank you, Dr. Inaya, for joining us. And we really like working with you here at NDU. And in this, at this point, I'd like to close it up. And would someone from the OHCHR like to say something? Otherwise, I'm handing it back to the organizers.
Yes, I would like to say to all the panelists, thank you so much for joining us today. And it was a really interesting discussion. And I hope we all learned from each other. And also, I hope the participants really benefited from everything that was said. And I hope we will be able to, of course, gather everything that was said into like a white paper and share it with everyone in a few days. And yeah, and thank you so much for being with us today. All right, everyone. I hope we can see each other again. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tamara, are you still there?
Yes, Dr. Eugene, thank you so much for this amazing session. I hope it was.
I thought it was pretty rich, and it was really, the one thing that was really difficult was integrating the chat questions.
Yes.
That we need to talk about for next time. But I thought I tried to sum them up in the end.
Yes, I was sending them to you privately, but I think the Kudo platform is a bit like hard to handle. I was sending them to you, but maybe you don't have a notification to tell you.
I wasn't seeing a notification.